All right, hi everybody. This is going to be the first part of the lecture video for chapter 5. This one is broken up into two parts. So I'm going to do the chapters section 5.1 to 5.2, just kind of introducing photosynthesis, and then the 5.3 to 5.6 kind of finishing up the chapter. That video is already available, or is also available for you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing these slides. Well, that's not the one that I wanted. Sorry about that. Nope, still giving me that one. Okay, we'll do it a different way. Okay, so y'all should be able to see these notes now for here. Okay, so with photosynthesis, right, photosynthesis is this process of creating sugar, creating this organic compound from inorganic carbon dioxide. It's an incredible process. They're taking electrical energy, or rather light energy from the sun, and they're able to turn it into chemical energy. So plants, algae, some bacteria, they can harness that and convert that. It's a really incredible process. So the organisms that do this are called autotrophs. Autotrophs are producers carrying out photosynthesis. Auto meaning self, and troph means to grow or produce or make. And so these things are making their own food. We look at cyanobacteria that do photosynthesis, but eukaryotes do it. Prokaryotes, eukaryotes, they all can do photosynthesis, whether it's in the water, on the land, really any of those locations. The one exception are archaea. They're not known to carry out any kind of photosynthetic process. So if you remember from chapter 4, we talked about the transformation of energy, how energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred. You can turn it from one form into another. And so that is photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is an endergonic process. It's an endergonic reaction where you are storing energy into molecules to be broken later, or to use those molecules to make something. So here you can see this is the part of the process where we take sunlight, the kinetic energy of photons, that then is captured and harnessed by the cells in plants or in photosynthetic organisms. And then in the process, they're making oxygen, they make sugar, which of course is where that energy is being stored. The energy isn't stored in oxygen. Oxygen is actually it's a waste product. Oxygen is toxic to plants, but the sugar is what we need, and they need too. And of course, along that process, we lose heat. That is always that fundamental, foundational aspect of energetic reactions, is that about 10% of the energy is lost as heat when we go through these transformations. Okay, so sunlight is the energy source that we need for this reaction. If you remember, with endergonic reactions, they require some kind of energy input, and for photosynthesis, it's sunlight. So the three basic things you need are sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. If plants have those three things and their natural enzymes that they contain, then they can produce sugar. They can make glucose out of these molecules. The carbons in glucose is C6H12O6. You should memorize that chemical formula. The carbons in glucose come from the carbons in carbon dioxide. So when a plant that's just kind of in a little pot of soil, when it grows and grows and gets bigger and bigger, it's not absorbing carbon from the soil in its pot. It's absorbing carbon from the atmosphere and turning it into physical structures. You can see again at the end here, oxygen is produced. So this is that cycle between photosynthesis and cellular respiration, and that plants use carbon dioxide and then produce oxygen. And then other organisms are going to use oxygen and produce carbon dioxide. And so this is that kind of reaction just kind of zoomed in. You can see a leaf cell here, the cell of a leaf. It's got these big chloroplasts in it. Chloroplasts, of course, being the site of photosynthesis. It's important, and I'll kind of give you a moment. Do plants also have mitochondria? And the answer, of course, is yes. plants still need to produce and make energy. So while they have chloroplasts that are making their own sugars for them, that sugar can then be sent to mitochondria for breakdown through cellular respiration to energy, or it can be converted into cellulose. It can be converted into cellulose or starch to make these larger plant structures, leaves and stems and fruits, things like that. I'm going to skip some of these Clipper questions. I tend to kind of jump over those. If you want to take a moment just to read through it, though, you can. And of course, the answer is to make their own food. Right? That is evolutionary advantageous. Although photosynthesis is not the oldest pathway, cellular respiration is an older pathway than photosynthesis. Okay, so one of the things that's required for photosynthesis is light energy. We talked about how light has energy, and you have to remember that energy is molecules in motion. Energy can be can be looked at in multiple different ways, but one of those ways is that energy is the ability then for something to do work, and to do work you need to have movement. So the energy that the sun is emitting, it's emitting in these waves. And some of them have a higher frequency and some of them have a lower frequency. So you can see here on this spectrum of visible light, red light has a lower wavelength versus violet and blue light, which has a higher wavelength, meaning it's higher energy. As you go up, you see things like ultraviolet radiation, X-rays, and gamma rays. Gamma rays having the highest energy. And if you are a Marvel fan, if you're a superhero fan, right, what turns Bruce Banner into the Hulk? Oh, it was those gamma rays. These really high energy rays that cause the molecules in cells to vibrate at a higher energy, electrons to vibrate at a higher orbital, and it makes them more likely to react. And so higher energy wavelengths cause more reactions to happen, whereas these lower energy wavelengths, infrared, microwaves, radio waves, really long wavelengths, very low energy, they really don't cause a lot of disruption, right? It's perfectly safe for babies and infants and pregnant women to use microwaves and radio waves because they really don't cause any damage to our cells, whereas we are very, very cautious with how much X-rays and gamma rays people are exposed to, especially gamma rays. If you're exposed to gamma radiation, something's wrong. So light has this ability to transfer energy. The light can act as these wavelengths, but it can also act as a photon, as a single particle. And plants have this ability to absorb that light. And in fact, everything around you has that ability. If you're looking at anything that you're looking at right now, unless of course it's talked about exceptions. But when you look at something, the color that you see is being reflected back to you. Any colors you don't see are being absorbed by that molecule. So things that are white, right? When you see something white, it is all colors being reflected back to you. Right? You're getting everything reflected back. When you see something that's blue, if you're looking at a piece of paper and it's a blue piece of paper, all the other colors are being absorbed. Violet, green, yellow, orange, red, all these other colors are being absorbed, but the blue wavelength is being reflected back. That's why you can see it. With black, no colors are being reflected back. All the colors are being absorbed and nothing is being reflected back. Again, it all depends on the molecules, the molecular structure of the thing that's making up that object, right? So when you look at a plant, when you look at, I'm going to zip ahead here, go. When you look at a green leaf, right, you're seeing green because that's the only color that's being reflected. Green light is being reflected. All the other colors are being absorbed, right? And the colors that get absorbed, that depends on the molecules that are in this plant's leaf. We call them photopigments. Photopigments are able to absorb light, different wavelengths of light, and when they absorb that light, they're no longer reflected. That color is not going to be reflected, so you're not going to see it. Okay, so most plants are green because they're absorbing reds, yellows, blues, purples, and then reflecting the green light back to you. And so you can see that in this scale right here. We have at the bottom wavelengths of light, the different colors of light, and then at the top is how much absorption along the y-axis, how much is being absorbed. So here are the different molecules that are the different photopigments in plant leaves, plant cells. You have chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, these carotenoids, and then there are some others as well. These are the three main ones though. Chlorophyll A being your primary photopigment. Chlorophyll B and carotenoids are what we call the accessory pigments. So chlorophyll A is the primary photopigment because it's in the largest amount. It is the most abundant one. And you can see that it really peaks around this like blue-purple light. So chlorophyll A is mostly going to be absorbing wavelengths of light at around this spectrum, right? When it starts to come down here into these greens, yellows, oranges even, it's really not absorbing a whole lot of light. Because they're not absorbing this light, it's getting reflected. And so you see green. You don't see plants as blue and purple and orange and red, maybe in some cases, right? But for the most part, when you're looking at a plant, it's going to be green because these molecules, these photopigments, absorb every other color except green. Right? So chlorophyll A, right, it's peaking around 475. Chlorophyll B, or I'm sorry, chlorophyll A is about 450. Chlorophyll B is about 475. Carotenoids about 480. So again, these are the molecules, these are the wavelengths that they're optimally absorbing at. But you can see down here, these molecules, they kind of peak again. They start to absorb down here the oranges and the reds. Well, this is what happens when the leaves start to change color. It's fall right now, so we're starting to see that. The leaves are starting to turn these other colors. What's happening is that these molecules are breaking apart. Your chlorophyll A is starting to break down. Some of this chlorophyll B and carotenoids are starting to break down. And what you have left, the photopigments that you have left, rather than absorbing your oranges and your reds, these photopigments absorb greens. So that way the leaves look orange and red to us. Okay, so this is just that it's an evolutionary trait for plants. So it allows them to maximize their light absorption. Rather than only having molecules that are only going to absorb this specific wavelength of light, they have different kinds of molecules that can absorb light at different spectrums, at different wavelengths. So that way, as the year goes on, they can maximize their light absorption. I'm born and raised in North Carolina. I grew up on the East Coast. I've been, on the eastern part of the state, and then I've been in Raleigh for about 20 years, 20 plus years. So I never knew that people didn't get 4 seasons throughout the year. I have always grown up having spring, summer, winter, fall. North Carolina, it used to be at least, not anymore, used to be very distinguishable seasons. And you would have light changes, weather changes. And so plants evolve to those shifting seasons. If you're at the equator, you really don't have changing weather. It stays pretty much, you might get a little hotter, a little wetter, but for the most part, your light availability is the same. That's why there's always this huge band of life that exists around the equator, because it has a constant supply of light energy. But when you go north and south of the equator, sunlight doesn't hit directly, it hits at an angle. And as the year shifts, as our rotation shifts, that angle starts to change as well. So plants, by being able to break down and remake different photopigments, they can adjust to those shifting wavelengths of light. So it's just maximizing their absorption potential. So again, chlorophyll A is the main photosynthetic pigment, each one absorbing light from some different wavelength and reflecting those others. Accessory pigments become less abundant, things like your chlorophyll Bs, carotenoids, xanthophylls, until those chlorophyll A molecules start to be broken down. So here is just the kind of overview of these pigments. The major one, chlorophyll A, other ones are chlorophyll B, your carotenoids. They're going to be absorbing blue-green, right? Absorbing yellow-green, absorbing red, orange, yellow. Only absorbed light is useful for photosynthesis, right? So only that light that gets absorbed by these photopigments can then be transferred to what we're going to call the photosystems. You'll see that in the next video. Okay, so it's only these molecules that can absorb the light. Green light is reflected, so it's not absorbed. This, again, just a little quick question if you want to pause and try that out. Going to go to the answer. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna get into just a little bit of leaf structure. So remember that we said that for photosynthesis to happen, we need to have energy source. It's an endergonic reaction. So our energy source is sunlight. We just saw how light can be energy. The next things that we need are carbon dioxide. Well, plants get their carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, particularly as organisms are exhaling and producing carbon dioxide. That is then naturally going to go down its gradient. It's going to diffuse down its gradient. That's some, again, chapter 4 stuff, right? As there's a lot of carbon dioxide on the outside, not a whole lot of CO2 on the inside of these cells. So CO2 will naturally want to diffuse down its gradient into a plant cell. It gets inside the plant cell through the leaf in these openings called stoma. The plural here is stomata. So if you see stomata, that's just referring to all the multiple openings that there are. But the stoma allows CO2 to go in. This goes through photosynthesis. And then the products are water and oxygen, these kind of byproducts of water and oxygen. They can exit the stoma. These particular cells are called mesophils. This kind of layer of cells are mesophyll cells. You see this single layer out here. These are the epidermal cells of the plant, right? When you touch a plant, you're touching these kind of epidermal cells. And then if you were to kind of cut a plant open, you'd see the epidermal cells on the outside and then the kind of meat of the sandwich, the filling of the sandwich, which are the mesophyll cells. And mesophyll cells are where photosynthesis happens, right? Chloroplasts exist in the mesophyll cells, and then they have these central vessels that allow for the transport of products. So here you can kind of see you have a whole leaf. We can zoom in on a section of a leaf and see the stoma that allows for gas and water exchange. Once we go into our mesophyll cells, if we just kind of pick a random cell, we can then see that it has its nucleus. Here's a mitochondria, and then these large chloroplasts for photosynthesis. And of course, that central vacuole that has things like water and lysosomes or enzymes for bacterial breakdown, solutes that the plant might need, all those kind of things. Again, you can see that the chloroplasts are green because they're reflecting that green color. The photopigments exist in the chloroplast. The photopigments are in the chloroplast, and so that's why you see the chloroplast appearing as a color, and eventually the whole leaf appears as that color. Okay, so each chloroplast has these stacks of membranes called thylakoids. So you have a chloroplast. Chloroplasts are packed full of these things called thylakoids. Each one of these little flat discs is a thylakoid. A stack of thylakoids is called a granum. The thylakoid also has a membrane, this phospholipid membrane, and this is where the photopigments are. Okay, so you have, go back, you got the whole leaf. Inside of the leaf, you have these mesophyll cells. That's just, again, just the layer, meso for middle, right? So just the leaves, the cells inside of the leaf all have chloroplasts, right? We can look at our chloroplasts as stacks, as just kind of like, they're just kind of like little, the chloroplast itself is this structure that is just existing to hold thylakoids, because thylakoids have the photopigments. Okay? You can also see that chloroplasts have their own DNA. They have ribosomes. Okay? There's also this fluid called the stroma. That's the fluid that's inside the chloroplast. Don't get that confused with the stoma, which are the openings and leaves. Okay? So thylakoids are what we really need. These have the photopigments that are going to be able to absorb light and create sugar eventually. So here you can kind of see it. You start with the full cell. Inside the cell are chloroplasts. Each chloroplast is packed full of thylakoids, and every thylakoid has this membrane that you can then embed with photopigments, that you can embed with enzymes that are going to be able to produce sugars, or the components for sugars. This membrane also gives you an inner thylakoid space and an outside space. And if you remember from chapter 4, by having this, this barrier, you can start to create concentration gradients, and concentration gradients can be harnessed to use to make energy. So we're going to see that in the next part. We're going to see how the structure of chloroplast and kind of get specific about these photopigments and the thylakoid membrane and the steps of photosynthesis, how plants actually absorb light to make products, and how those products can then be used to make sugar. Photosynthesis kind of exists in two steps that way. You have the light reactions, light-dependent reactions, and the light-independent reactions. It all happens here in the chloroplast, though. Okay, so here is the light capture systems, these photosystems. So again, within a chloroplast, you're stacked full of thylakoids. The thylakoids have their membrane. So that's what you're looking at here, is that you're looking at this thylakoid membrane, and embedded in the membrane is called a photosystem. So there are two photosystems, photosystem 1 and photosystem 2, and they are embedded with all of these photopigments. So their job as a photosystem is to essentially, it's just a big protein kind of like housing for the photopigments. So the photopigments are going to absorb light, and they kind of pass it from one to the other until this reaction center, this main chlorophyll molecule, is ready to absorb this light energy. Once it absorbs its light energy, it can then use that to fuel different processes that you'll see. So something to remember. When we talk about energy, we talk about light energy. Specifically, in this case, we're talking about them exciting electrons. When electrons are at a lower energy state, they're less reactive. When you excite electrons, you move them up to a higher orbital, they're more likely to react. And if you remember, with electrons, reacting means forming and breaking bonds. So this first photopigment right here is absorbing light energy. Its electrons get excited, and they're naturally going to want to jump from one photopigment to the next, to the next, to the next, until eventually they get to this reaction center chlorophyll. Now, it's important to have all of these different antenna pigments, these accessory antenna pigments, because if all you have is the reaction center chlorophyll, you can only excite one electron at a time. You have to take one, you have to wait for it to get excited, you have to wait for this chlorophyll to donate it to something else, and then another one can be passed along. But by having antenna pigments, each one of these antenna pigments can be absorbing, can be bonding an electron, exciting it, and passing it to the next. So that way the chlorophyll, this reaction center chlorophyll, has kind of a constant, almost constant supply of electrons that it can pass along for photosynthesis. Okay, so that's the basic structure, right? You have a thylakoid with a thylakoid membrane. The membrane is going to be embedded with these proteins, these photosystem proteins. Each photosystem is packed full of pigments, pigment molecules that can absorb light and then pass it along, right? You have to have some kind of intermediate there. So these things can absorb light and then pass it along. Yeah, okay. So this is where the next video picks up. I'm going to let it pick up there. But essentially, it's going to show you how the light that was being absorbed, those electrons that were being formed, that energy that's being formed in the light reactions can then be used, right? In the light reactions, you're making ATP and NADPH, these energy molecules. These energy molecules can then be used in the carbon reactions to fix carbon dioxide as sugar. Okay, so that's going to be on the next video. You can pick it up there. Enjoy.